Hi guys, it's me from home trying to talk to you and hoping and praying that you are well and that you stay well and healthy throughout this rather difficult and challenging time. Anyway, I've sent you an email, as you have seen this morning, which gives you some information about where you're going and the work that I'm asking you to do. Well, the second part of that is to do with writing decent covering letters. At this point, you're going, oh, yawn, we know how to do that. Take it from me, the vast majority of you don't, because you've never been on the receiving end of covering letters and CVs and application forms and understood how you receive them, how you look at them, how you feel about them, how you judge them. So in addition to my quick 10 tips, I'm trying to give you something rather more detailed here, which will give you an idea of how to go about doing it and doing it but well. Okay, well, the name of the game is differentiation. What's that? Positive differences between the quality of what you're producing and other people, which is sufficient so that they will choose you and reject the others. If you're in a pile of 200, 400, 600, 1,000, and they're probably only going to interview 12 or maybe maximum 20, you really have to do well to get selected for interview. So how do you do that? Well, I get the impression that you spend an awful lot of time on your CVs. Fair enough, you should. I also get the impression that you don't generally, at the level of university students at least, whether it's degree or master's level, you don't spend quite so much time and effort on the covering letters. Oh boy, you need to. In fact, in some senses, they are more important than your CV. Why? Because they cover. The covering letter covers the CV. And as the BBC have said in research they did in December 2018, 85% of CVs are never looked at. I don't mean never read, I mean never even seen. Why? Because the covering letter, what does it cover? It covers the CV. And obviously, if you're giving someone who's looking at that any kind of excuse to get rid of something that they don't want to look at again, they'll use that excuse and into the bin everything will go. So what I'm trying to do here is giving you a recipe for how you positively differentiate yourself. So here we go. First thing, I would buy some decent paper. Photocopier paper is 80 gram. And what does it say? This is ordinary course of the business. This is not special. This is cheap and nasty. You are trying to say the opposite. You're trying to say you are quality. You are good. You are better than the others. Well, for Pete's sake, show the employer that you are. Don't therefore buy cheap white envelopes with windows on them that your tax demand or les impôts come in. Don't send it in an internal mail type manila envelope. Go and buy yourself some decent stationery. Make a small investment in yourself. It might cost you 15, 20 euros rather than 7 or 8, but come on, it's worth it. It's about investing on you and your future. You need 120 gram paper, and I wouldn't go for white either. Off-white or cream or something like that. Not loud and bright yellow and luminous, but something that says this is different. When you pick up a piece of paper of that quality, you can feel the quality in your fingers. So you need matching envelopes for that. What's going to be on the envelope? Well, first thing is the name, not just the title. Get the name of the person concerned. Quite often adverts say, writes to Head of Human Resources. Now, if you want to get ahead of the game, you ring up or you look at the website and you find out the name of the Head of Human Resources or whoever it happens to be, and you get the name right, and you address your letter to the equivalent of Mr. Tony Jolly, Head of Human Resources, Company X. Why is that important? Well, it's obvious if you think about it. If you were writing to Head of Human Resources, Company X, a secretary would open it and do whatever she wanted with it. Does she have any real influence on the hiring decision or selection? Probably not. On the other hand, if you get someone's name and you write to that person by name, you are saying you have taken some effort to find out who they are and to write to them. You have tried to capture the eyes of the most important person, whereas 99.9% of the others will not have done so. That says something about you. Already you're saying, this is quality material, and I'm addressing you personally, professionally, not just by your title. Virtually no one else will do that. Now, if your if your covering letter is particularly good and your CV with it, you've got the eyes of the most important person there who's likely to say, put that on the interview pile, that's good. So find that person's name, address it to them using their title as well. So what's the next thing? Well, obviously, when they open the letter and they unfold it, they will feel the quality in the hands of this piece of paper. But they also need to have a wow moment when they open it. Do you start at the top left-hand corner and read line by line by line all the way down? No, you don't. You pick up a piece of paper, you look at it, and your eyes dart all around the place on it, trying to work it out. Sometimes you get, oh God, that looks awful. Just look at that margin. Oh, this guy doesn't know how to paragraph properly, etc. Oh, the address is in the wrong place. Before you start reading, you take in an awful lot of information, most of which is sufficient enough, if it's poor, for you just to find your application straight in the bin. It's got to have the wow factor. Look online, look at some letters, not just for content, but for the wow factor of how they are laid out, how they paragraph, how they use space, what fonts they use, where they accentuate things with maybe italic or with bold. You've got to get that sense of style and design, not just the right words. So far we've got three things. We've got the paper that says this is quality. We've got the name that says you do so much more, and you've got the wow factor. There's three things that nobody else has got so far, and they're all in front of the boss's eyes. So there you are. What next? Well, things also have to be laid out according to what we call conventions. Well, I'll run through the conventions of a standard English language business letter now for you. Starting at the top. The addresses are the wrong way round for you in France. Your address is on the right, the company's address is on the left. Do they have to be one there and one there, or one there and one there? To be honest, it doesn't matter. In fact, in a covering letter, you probably need to save a bit of space to fit things on one page if you can. But if you can't, you have to go over. Nobody's going to shoot you for that. So what are you going to do? Well, the addresses are going to go up there the right way around. What comes after the addresses? Well, okay, and phone numbers, email address. What comes after them? Well, the date. Where does the date go? The right-hand side, a line down from the address. Now, when you're writing the date, you do not do Brunstadt, the 3rd of December 2007, or whatever it happens to be. We couldn't care less where you wrote the letter. You've written your address on there, and you want us to write back to it. So please, 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 don't bother telling us you wrote the letter in Brunstadt or on the train between Bruges and Paris. It doesn't matter. In terms of the format of the date, Americans read the date 9/11 as the 11th of September, whereas most people in the English-speaking world, other than the Americans, will read it as, guess what? Well, you work it out. But the issue is, to avoid that mistake, always write the month in words. January, February, March. Don't do it in numbers, then you can never get it wrong. What comes after the date? Well, you're probably going to say objet and translate that to me and say it's object, Tony. Oh, no, subject would be better. Well, you're wrong on all of those counts. The first thing that we do, because we're infinitely polite people, is to address someone, to greet them. You do this in the street. You go straight for the B's before you even say a word to anybody. Well, why, when you're doing a letter, do you shout at somebody, objet, it's about X, Y, Z, and then you say, dear Mr. Jolly? Well, that's not polite. It's inconsistent with what you do elsewhere. In the English-speaking world, you address someone, then you tell them what it's about. So it's going to be dear Mr. Jolly, or dear Mrs. Jolly, whatever. It's never going to be dear Mr. Tony Jolly. You'll never ever write that. If you don't know me, you're going to have to call me dear Mr. Jolly. If you do know me and I've said to you, hey, call me Tony, it'll be dear Tony, but it'll never be dear Mr. Tony Jolly. And Mr. is always a title, capital M, small r, full stop. It is not M-I-S-T-E-R. Okay? Comma. Then what? Well, yes, at some point you have to do your objet-subject thing, but we don't use either of those terms. We use a little word, re, R-E, R-E, with a colon after it. Then what are you going to write? Well, the title of the post and the reference for that post. Application for the post of Assistant Communications Manager, post reference 234/20. Then what? Well, you then need to start your first paragraph. It's going to be with a capital letter, isn't it? Actually, surprisingly, technically, it isn't. A capital or lowercase letter will do, but technically the right one is the lowercase letter, because you've got a comma after your name. You haven't finished. It's not a full stop. So the first word of your first paragraph, and you don't have to indent it if you don't want to, no many minds. The first letter should be with a lowercase, and I would recommend 2 words to you to begin any letter about a job. Further to. Why those words? Well, you need to give them a very important piece of information that they will not know unless you tell them. What's that piece of information that they don't know, that has value to them, that only you have? Well, the answer is obvious. Where you find out about the job. The companies are advertising with local agents, they're advertising in the newspapers, national and local, and repeating it every Friday for 3 weeks. They're on local radio, they're on their professional associations website, they're all over the place. And all of that costs money. They would love to know, in fact, where their best applicants come from. Well, if they all come from the company's website, well, why the hell bother with all of these other means? Save money and stop it. So the first thing you should be saying is, further to the advertisement for this post as viewed on Monster Board on the 23rd of December, I'm writing to enclose my CV as I would very much like to be considered for this position, for which I believe myself to be appropriately qualified and experienced. So in that first paragraph, you're impressing them again. You're showing them you're not just thinking about you, you're thinking about them and what they need. You're giving them that vital piece of information, and you're selling in the rest of that sentence the idea that you have all the knowledge that they need, all the skills that they need, and you are the type of person with the right sort of experience that will do that job well. So there's your intro, it's written. Well, let's go to the end of the letter, and then I'm going to do the sandwich bit in the middle, okay? Well, the end of the letter. You're going to need some kind of outro. Well, what's that going to be? At some point, you have to pass the letter gently back to them. So how do you do it? Something like this. I trust you will find my application to be of interest. Should you require any further information, I would be only too happy to provide it, and, of course, to attend interview at your convenience. Full stop, space, space. I now look forward to hearing from you. There's a soft ending, passing it back to the company to deal with. Please do not ever say, and I will be ringing you up on Tuesday to find out if you got my letter or not. That's too pushy. Never do it. Okay? The other thing is, if you have started the letter with somebody's name, you've started it with Dear Mr. Jolly or Dear Mrs. Jolly, you have to have the end salutation that goes with it, which is yours sincerely. Okay? And then you write your name, type your name, and you leave a gap and you sign between the yours sincerely and your name. Okay? If, even though you've tried, you can't get that person's name, what you need to do is to write at the top, obviously, Dear Sir, and at the bottom, yours faithfully. It's the most formal form of address that we have, unless you are writing to the Archbishop of Canterbury, an MP, the Prime Minister, or the Queen. Just use those two. When you get to know someone, of course, but you don't in this particular situation, when you get to know somebody, you have the same gradient of salutations that you have in France. Bien cordialement, cordialement, amitié, bis, cheers, best, whatever it happens to be. But at this stage, you can't do that. So there's no sincerely yours. It's yours sincerely. Okay? Just use those two. Dear Sir, yours faithfully. Dear Mr. Jolly, yours sincerely. Please never, ever try to translate a French salutation avec mes sentiments les plus respectueux, etc. To the English-speaking ear, it's totally sycophantic. I'll leave you to look that up if you don't know what that is. Okay? So there we go. We're nearly there. All I need to tell you briefly is what to do in the middle of the letter. Well, you've probably got two sections, each of maybe a couple of paragraphs. What's the first one? Well, it's easy. They've given you a list of all the things they want you to be able to do. It's in the job description. So what you need to do in a couple of paragraphs is to look at the most important things on that list. You probably can't cover all of them. There may be 16 or 18 things they want you to do. But towards the top of the list, almost always, whether it's numbered or bullet pointed, are the most important things that they want. Look at those. Decide where you've got something really impressive to say, a good success story, a fabulous qualification, whatever it happens to be, and deliver that. Show them how you fit exactly what it is that they're saying they want you to do. So that's your first section of maybe a couple of paragraphs. What comes next? Well, you've got another section which isn't just based on what they want you to do. It's based on the type of person they want you to be and the type of experience that they want you to have. So same thing goes. You've got a list of those on the person specification or personal profile that comes with the post. So please, 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 would you use that and act as a mirror to give back to them what it is that they say that they want in a way that makes you look impressive. Okay? Please don't ever go for a fabled paragraph that they insist on French covering letters, where you try to impress them with what you know about the company. You are a very big company. You have a profit of 684 million. You employ 2,655,000 people. That's totally useless. It's useless because they know that better than you do. You're proving nothing. If you've read something interesting and it relates to you, your interest, your abilities, yeah, well, maybe you can squeeze that in. Perhaps maybe the chairman has said they're expanding into Southeast Asia, and you want to say, in fact, I'm the son of a diplomat, and I lived in Southeast Asia for 4 years. I've got a smattering of Japanese and I understand Southeast Asian cultures, so I could well be useful in this endeavour. Well, that's fine, but not just a line or three or a whole paragraph about how big the company is. It's pointless. So there you go. Have a look at my list of 10 key points, 10 tips. I think actually there's 12 or 13 there, and see what you can do with it. Because what I want is to see the job details, the job offer, person specification, and job description, because I'm going to measure the quality of your covering letter against that. So if you've done a standard covering letter, don't even begin with it. You've got to design each and every covering letter differently. I think you can start with the same intro and the same outro, but between those 2 points, you really, really, really have to work on being this mirror image. And it has to have a hook. What do I mean by that? Think of the song that you love best, and you know the moment you hear the intro that you are hooked. For me, it's Queen, David Bowie, Under Pressure. Dun 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 dun. It's 7 notes played on 1 string. 6 notes are identical and the other one is dropped to semitone. It's the most ridiculously simple thing that you can ever imagine. But why then do 140,000 people in Wembley Stadium start screaming and jumping before anybody sung anything? Because it's a hook. That's what your covering letter has to be. Because it's covering your CV. And unless it's got that ding 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 ding, they are not going to turn the page to bother to look at your CV, no matter how well you've designed it. Okay? So as my father would have said, now think on. I want your covering letters to embody these type of principles. Okay? That's what I'm looking for. Hopefully now, after I finish this, I'll manage to get this either on my website or made accessible somewhere for you, and fingers crossed it will help you. Okay? Above all, in this difficult time, stay safe, look after yourself, your friends and your families. Obey the restrictions we're being given. There's not much between us and a big disaster if we don't. So the very, very best of health to you and yours. And I look forward to receiving your work on the due date. Okay? All the very best from me to you. Goodbye.